Welcome back, Warcraft grognards and other enjoyers of vintage video games. Does World of Warcraft really count as vintage now? I mean, it's still going, but if it was a person, it would be legally allowed to drink in the US, which has a crazy high age for drinking. Either way, if you watched one of my recent videos, you would know I enjoy designing RPG classes, be it for TTRPGs or what should they look like in an MMO. And today I have for you something very popular, something that keeps coming up all the time in these discussions, and yet you're still not allowed to play that in World of Warcraft. And that is, of course, the Tinker. Tinkers have been a part of Warcraft lore for as long as Death Knights, and that's the second War Death Knights, not the current incarnation, so they can be argued to be older than that. You first see goblins and gnomes working on their crazy, seemingly anachronistic technology all the way back in Warcraft 2, and you don't really play many of their units. They are there in the background making ships and submarines and inexplicable industrial level technology in a setting that just prior had been fairly medieval. And let me tell you, that unique technology, that unique slant, really allowed Warcraft to stand on its own. If you look back to Warcraft Orcs and Humans, what you see is a fairly standard basic fantasy. Humans, orcs, ogres, wizards, clerics, warlocks. It's all fairly basic and wouldn't be out of place in some random DM's basic fantasy world he made so that he doesn't have to learn Forgotten Realms lore and can make up his own stuff. And don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with that on its own, but the world building in Warcraft 1 wasn't the strongest side of the game. And everything changed in Warcraft 2. Besides a lot more culture that has been built up on both sides, a bunch of new races that are still mostly standard fantasy fare, it adds things like oil, ships, and steam tanks running on that oil, gnomes flying around in gyrocopters, and it's not exactly steampunk. The technology seemingly doesn't make sense on a level that is almost like the orcs of Warhammer 40k. It works because it works. Because it's cool. Now, in Warcraft 3, goblins have gone neutral. Gnomes seemingly disappeared due to their own problems. But now the goblins are everywhere, and their unique technology is used regularly by all sides during the campaigns and during the multiplayer matches. It's impossible to avoid the goblins, and they become one of the key elements of the setting. They become one of the most distinct parts of the setting that really lets it stand out. In future patches, goblin tinkers and alchemists become neutral hero units, further cementing their iconic status. Come World of Warcraft, goblins are not playable. Gnomes are, but they are almost an afterthought, with one of their shortest lists of playable classes. Tinkers are not a class, though I am told they have been considered. It takes WoW 3 expansions to introduce playable goblins as a race, but they do not have Tinkers. And to this day, 21 years later, we still do not have Tinkers in any form. And from all that unique, iconic technology of the older games, all we got is an engineering profession, and hunters can use guns? Much like with the necromancers, the most common arguments against Tinkers are, we don't need them because we have X. And just like with the necromancers, the X is always something completely different and unrelated. So let me quickly go through these silly arguments. We don't need Tinkers because we have the engineering profession. Well, we have the blacksmithing profession, but we still have warriors, and paladins, and rogues, and most other classes that use weapons and armor that blacksmithing crafts. Engineering simply crafts the tools, and it's not a character class. We don't need tinkers because hunters already use guns. That we have only one class that uses ranged weapons is a whole other problem, and one that I keep complaining about in almost every video because it really irks me. If we were limited to one class per weapon type, we would have warriors, hunters, and mages maybe. Maybe even less. And there's games that do have a selection as narrow as that, and I'm sure it works for them great. But it really doesn't do justice to the potential wealth of character options, especially in a setting like Warcraft. And my favorite argument against Tinkers: we don't need Tinkers because they are silly. And brother, I do not know how to tell you this, but Warcraft is silly. It's very, very silly. Like I already told you, goblins and gnomes have been a part of this setting for longer than Death Knights as we know them. The silly and the technology lies in the very core genes of this setting, and I believe it would not be where it is now if it wasn't for the silly. So if Tinkers were really so inherently silly, and they are not, that would only be an argument in favor of including them as a class. Now, so this video isn't just me arguing into the void with the people I've read online who are not here to respond. Like with the Necromancer, I have for you proof of how this class can work, and how its unique playstyle would work in World of Warcraft, because I still had this basic concept worked out for many years. In fact, I developed this before Star Wars The Old Republic came out in 2011, and had almost the same exact idea for their bounty hunter. This sort of stuff, by the way, happens to me a lot, where I go off to do some fun work, and almost immediately Blizzard or someone else releases almost the same exact idea, because they actually have the money and connections to put it into practice. Does someone listening have a couple $1,000,000 to give me so I can make my own video game studio? No? I didn't think so. Tinkers use primarily plate armor, and they favor ranged weapons such as guns and crossbows, but they can also use swords, axes, or maces, and their favored primary attribute is intellect, which lets us finally have more use out of all that int plate that only holy paladins used. And in an ideal world, I would like it if Tinkers also introduced one or even two new weapon types. The first one is pretty simple, and it's pistols as one-handed guns, which you could probably also give to rogues, to maybe let outlaw rogues finally become proper gunslingers. And the second one is more unique and is admittedly something that is just a favorite of mine, and it fits the Tinker fantasy well, and that could be called elemental weapons, projectors, or in common parlance flamethrowers, only not limited to fire. These elemental weapons shoot magical damage types such as fire, ice, shadow, nature, and they typically have shorter range than proper guns, but they certainly give you a very unique design that doesn't really exist in World of Warcraft right now. And it fits the Tinker class fantasy splendidly. Now, as for the Tinker proper, they have two major resources: phlogiston and steam. In the old lore from the RPG era, phlogiston was this magical substance distilled from the air, something like the ether of the old-timey science. Phlogiston starts out full, like mana, and very slowly regenerates over time, which is part of why the Tinkers like intellect, which helps with that. However, the steam resource starts out empty, and as you use your phlogiston, your steam starts building up, overheating your mech or your Tinker gear, and if you do not vent it, it might start giving you trouble like dots or debuffs. So as you see your steam build up and reach near full, you have to use the abilities to spend the steam, venting it around you, maybe regaining some phlogiston, and you release those dots and debuffs on your enemies instead. And yes, it sounds a lot like the Star Wars The Old Republic bounty hunter, but I swear I made this before 2011. So that's the basic functionality of the Tinker. Wade right into enemies, spend your phlogiston to release rockets and gouts of flame and chainsaws, and then vent your steam to burn the enemies around you. But what are the Tinker's specializations? What roles can it fulfill? And being an extremely versatile class, almost to the level of druids, being able to wear gear or mechs that have fulfill different roles, they can fulfill every role in World of Warcraft. The dedicated tank spec is called Steam Warrior, just like the old RPG prestige class. The Steam Warrior Tinker wears the biggest, heaviest mechs. They are the ones most focused on getting into the fray and spraying the unholy hell over everyone there. Chainsaws, bombs, rockets, all drawing a lot of attention from their enemies. And if their mech is destroyed, they pop out of the mech and can then rebuild it either over time or through using their active abilities, and your enemies can stop you from doing that if they manage to nail you down. The second spec is called Gadgeteer. This is the one that most resembles the Tinker hero from Warcraft 3. They prefer smaller constructs they wear on their back with claws and drills, and they focus mostly on the gun-using aspect of the Tinker, augmenting their shooting with extra gadgets, turrets they plop down on the ground everywhere like totems or bombling pads, and specialized abilities with a lot of different utility for very situational buffs. Their third and final spec is the Alchemist. Now, this was a separate hero unit in Warcraft 3, and in my own Warcraft TTRPG system it is also a separate class, but let's be honest, it probably can't really hold its own in actual WoW. So here, the Alchemist is the Tinker healer specialization. Instead of spraying enemies with fire and rockets, you instead shoot healing darts into people and spray potions all over them, focusing on direct healing and support. Much like every modern class, Tinker also has hero talents. Steam Warriors and Gadgeteers can choose to become Bombardiers, also based on the RPG Prestige class. Bombardiers really focus on spreading their bombs and gadgets everywhere, allowing them to spread more of them and, Junkrat style, bounce their projectiles off walls and objects to hit people they can't see. And yes, they would probably be a total menace in PvP, being either terrible or OP depending on the skill of the player playing it, but that is good. You want to reward people for skill. The Gadgeteers and Alchemists can choose to become Sentries. Sentry Tinkers really focus on their turrets, allowing them to put down more turrets, have them last longer, have the turrets see through stealth, or build one big turret that the Sentry really focuses on fixing and upgrading while in combat. The final hero talent is the Techno Mage, available to Steam Warriors and Alchemists. Though in the RPG it was the link between mages and tinkers, here the Techno Mage can focus on infusing their gear with spells and magic, giving them a selection of special buffs that increase their versatility even beyond that of the regular tinkers, perhaps even copying abilities of their party members or allies to some degree. One of the keystones of the tinker's versatility is also how much customization it can give you. I imagine a lot of WoW races could actually play tinkers, and not just goblins and gnomes. Humans also use technology. Dwarves really do like their technology as well. Draenei have their own different style of technology, and so do Blood Elves. I can imagine tinkers, much like druids, having racial-based unique designs for their mechs and turrets, such as Draenei having crystalline constructs or ones resembling the vigilants of Draenor. Dwarven ones would look more like their golems. Blood Elf ones would look like those arcane constructs in Silvermoon and Quel'Danas. And so on and so on. Every race could have their very unique design that really adds to the customization aspect of your character, and perhaps using some of the newer customization additions in the recent expansions, you could probably even choose to have the style of mech from a different race that when your character is playing. So much like druids could choose to customize their animal forms to a specific different form than the normal one, perhaps as a dwarf you would be able to still customize your mech to look more like a vigilant. Maybe there would be additional customization options similar to what you do with the newer customizable mounts in Dragonflight and the War Within. Perhaps even in that way you could further, like, to use that old April Fool's joke, pimp your mech out. this all really only scratches the surface of what the Tinkers could do. This is a really extremely versatile and original concept that isn't really represented in any way among the playable classes. And yet Blizzard almost turns it into such a joke, toying with players about introducing Tinkers because they do not treat the idea seriously. And yes, Tinkers are somewhat unserious in the sense of their aesthetics and their lore, but they are very serious, in terms of mechanics, classes that we are really missing in the game. And yet Blizzard refuses to give us the Tinkers and piecemeals Kazan with tiny bits every 3 expansions or so, almost as if they were trying very hard to not have a chance to have a technology-themed expansion, which would be a perfect time to introduce Tinkers. I could go on about the specifics and various different designs you could do for Tinkers for hours and hours, but nobody's going to be sitting here listening to all that. So let that be all for this video, and let me know if you liked this design and if you would like to see it introduced in World of Warcraft. Would you have designed it differently? Are there any other classes you think I should go into depth into? Let me know in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like and subscribe and all that YouTube stuff. And I'll see you next time.